Richard Tiffany Gere, born on August 31st, 1949 in Philadelphia, spent much of his early life in the small town of Syracuse, New York. A place with only 5,000 people, it was far from the bright lights of Hollywood, yet Richard felt an intense restlessness within. His father, Homer Gere, was an insurance agent who also dreamed of being a Methodist minister. In this quiet town, Homer was a man people trusted. Richard grew up in a deeply compassionate home, where music filled the air. His mother, Doris Ann, was a homemaker who created a warm environment, and the Gere household was always surrounded by instruments. Richard played many of them, excelling in both music and gymnastics. He was disciplined and curious, asking the big questions about life even as a young man. His love for philosophy led him to study it in college, but the questions he sought answers for were too big for the classroom. The journey into acting. After 2 years of college, Richard dropped out, making a bold decision to pursue acting. He moved to New York City in 1969, diving into the world of theatre and starting his career at the Seattle Repertory Theatre. At this point, he was struggling to make ends meet, often sleeping in his car, taking on any role he could find. But his big break came in 1973 when he joined the original London stage production of Grease. By 1978, Richard was becoming a recognisable name, starring in Days of Heaven, directed by Terrence Malick. The film received critical acclaim, but it was the 1980 film American Gigolo that truly turned him into a star. Richard's magnetic presence on screen transformed him into an international sex symbol, a title that seemed to fit him effortlessly. However, despite the fame, Richard was already seeking something deeper than Hollywood's superficial allure. Spiritual awakening in Nepal. In 1978, while his career was beginning to soar, Richard embarked on a life-changing journey to Nepal. There, he met Tibetan monks and lamas, and it was through these encounters that he felt a profound spiritual awakening. The meeting with the Dalai Lama was particularly significant, altering Richard's entire perspective on life and acting. Richard had always been restless, and through Buddhism, he found a sense of peace and purpose that Hollywood couldn't offer. The Dalai Lama's teachings challenged Richard's beliefs about acting and emotions, showing him a way of being that transcended the ego. The more Richard learned, the more he integrated Buddhist practices into his life, walking across Tibet as a pilgrim and practicing in remote monasteries. For Richard, Buddhism was not just a passing interest, but a lifelong commitment to a new way of living. Hollywood's temptations and challenges. Despite his newfound spiritual peace, Richard's acting career was about to take off in Hollywood. In the late 1970s, he landed small roles, but it was American Gigolo in 1980 that solidified his status as a star. The film made him a sex symbol, and soon, Richard Gere was one of the hottest names in Hollywood. By 1982, he starred in An Officer and a Gentleman, which grossed nearly $130 million and earned him his first Golden Globe nomination. His fame was meteoric. However, the pressure to maintain this image began to wear on him. As Richard immersed himself in Buddhist teachings and activism, particularly advocating for Tibet and calling out China's human rights abuses, he found himself at odds with the very industry that had made him a household name. Hollywood, hungry for profits, began distancing itself from Richard as he voiced his beliefs, making his career trajectory increasingly difficult. Speaking out for Tibet. In 1987, Richard Gere began speaking out about the Chinese government's occupation of Tibet. This was a personal cause for him, as the Dalai Lama had asked him for help. However, Richard's outspoken activism didn't sit well with Hollywood. China represented a massive market, and Richard's condemnation of its actions was a direct challenge to the industry's financial interests. In 1993, at the Academy Awards, Richard used his platform to speak out about China's human rights violations. The backlash was immediate. He was banned from presenting at the Oscars again, and major studios began quietly shelving projects with him attached. Yet, Richard remained steadfast, unafraid of the consequences. He said that his politics made him unwelcome in Hollywood, but he had no regrets. For Richard, speaking the truth had always been more important than the fame or fortune Hollywood offered. Love and turmoil with Cindy Crawford. Amidst his professional turmoil, Richard found love with supermodel Cindy Crawford. They met at a barbecue in 1988, and despite the 17-year age gap, they quickly formed a bond. They shared a love for Buddhism, meditation, and escaping the chaos of fame. Their relationship seemed like the perfect union of beauty, talent, and success. However, the pressures of their respective careers and the demands of their public image took a toll on their relationship. The couple married in December 1991 in a spontaneous ceremony in Las Vegas. Despite their love for each other, the marriage quickly faced difficulties. The tabloids began to speculate about their relationship, fueling rumours and doubts. In 1994, they took out a full-page ad in the Times of London to defend their relationship, but this only seemed to amplify the rumours. By the end of the year, they separated, ending their 4-year marriage. The toll of fame and personal sacrifice. By the time Richard and Cindy had parted ways, Richard's career had already begun to take a backseat to his spiritual and personal pursuits. Hollywood, once his home, had begun to reject him as he distanced himself from the lifestyle it had offered. His activism, spiritual beliefs, and personal sacrifices led to his exile from the industry. Despite this, Richard found solace in his personal life. He embraced the simplicity of living without the constant demands of fame and the pressure to conform. At 73, Richard became a father, raising infant twins in Madrid, where he lived in relative anonymity. His health, however, began to decline, and his body gave out after years of stress. Yet, through it all, Richard had discovered something far more valuable than fame: peace and purpose. He had sacrificed everything the world valued for something that couldn't be measured in dollars or accolades. In exile, Richard found the peace that Hollywood had never offered him. A life in exile, but not without purpose. At 76, Richard Gere's life stands as a testament to the power of choosing principle over profit. He may have walked away from Hollywood's riches and red carpets, but in doing so, he reclaimed a life filled with meaning and authenticity. While other actors chased billion-dollar franchises, Richard took a different path. He chose spirituality over superstardom, love over fame, and truth over silence. Though the industry may have erased him, Richard has found peace in the life he built outside the limelight. He may no longer be the face of blockbuster films, but in the quiet streets of Madrid, surrounded by the love of his family, Richard Gere has found something that Hollywood could never offer: a life truly lived on his own terms.